everyone, and welcome to a special presentation from CUNY TV. I'm Anne Riddell. As part of Women's History Month, we are bringing you Her Story, a conversation about empowering women. To that end, we are thrilled to have an incredibly accomplished panel with us in the studio. I'm joined by 4 members of CUNY's Board of Trustees, Vice Chairperson Sandra Wilkin, and Trustees Lorraine Cortés-Vázquez, Jill O'Donnell-Tormey, and Herminia Palacio. Thanks so much to all of you for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
We appreciate you making the time. So all of you are so accomplished in different areas, from the private sector to the nonprofit world. Obviously, all of you care very deeply about education. But I'd like to start today by hearing a little bit from each of you about your professional lives outside of CUNY. Sandra, perhaps we could start with you. You founded Bradford Construction in 1989, I believe I have that right, a construction management firm. And it's so interesting because I think construction is an area where we, think of it as largely male-dominated. So my question is, why construction?
That's a great question. When I was growing up, last thing I would have thought about was construction. And really what drove me to doing other things, I was going for nursing at the time, and saw that on my TV that we were able to have. What happened was we saw the march for Gloria Steinem and Congresswoman Bella Abzug. And they came out with saying the word feminism. And I said, what on earth is feminism? And it really changed my focus in terms of realizing that you can do other areas of interest.
Besides the traditional sort of things,
Yes, so I combined the nursing with more about engineering and architecture.
That is really fascinating.
But that was the nirvana moment for me in saying, well, if there's something else out there that I can be part of that would extend what I wanted to do, that would be it.
So, Lorraine, you are the city's commissioner for the Department for the Aging. You were also, I believe, the first Latina to serve as Secretary of State in New York, many other accomplishments as well. Did you always know that you wanted public service?
I believe so. I come from a long line of women who have served. My grandmother was a union organizer. My mother was a community activist. So I think that was just a natural part. They had different ambitions for us, but we followed in their footsteps. So service has always been part of my life, my upbringing, and it was just a natural for me.
And Jill, you come from a science background. I know that you retired recently as CEO of the Cancer Research Institute. 37 years, right?
That's right.
Congratulations. That is really something. But your interest in science started somewhere closer to first grade, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so that's straight. I mean, I don't know where the interest for science comes. There's no one in my family, not like following any footsteps. There was no one in my family who was in science or medicine. But I tell this funny story that I was in first grade. I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and I had a nun at the time, and we're in the grade, and Mother Saint says, okay, girls, let's all go to the laboratory. So I get so excited, light up, I think, okay, we're going into a laboratory. I'm going to actually see science. And I was very disappointed when we ended up in the bathroom. And I distinctly remember that excitement about it. So where that came from, I don't know. But then I always was the girl that wanted the chemistry sets and the microscopes and people coming over to my house to play, and we'd be in the basement doing experiments.
And did you feel supported in that pursuit growing up as a girl?
Well, I think part of it going to an all-girls school makes a very big difference.
Yes.
So I was very much empowered by that, feeling like I could do anything. So yes, there was never any doubt that whatever you wanted to do, you could do. And when I went to college, I'm old, so when I was a chemistry major, so many times after the freshman introductory classes, I was the only woman in my class. But I always felt I could do anything and succeed at it.
That's wonderful. Herminia, you have a long history in government and in public health. You were a deputy mayor here in the city. You are a physician. What drew you to public health?
You know, as a physician, I always knew, even before I went to medical school, that what I really wanted to do was like care for underserved urban populations. I am the daughter of immigrants who grew up in the Bronx, and that felt like the right purpose for me. And seeing patients, especially during the very early days of the HIV epidemic, it was really clear that a lot of what we could do as physicians was limited by people's social circumstances.
Sure.
So actually after residency, I took an unusual route. It was after becoming a physician, I was practicing full-time. I went back to public health school and I got my master's in public health, and that really sort of drove me into a trajectory where for a long time I was both the clinician, a physician of individual patients, but I was also the community's physician as a health director and later as deputy mayor. So I was really thinking about health and all of the things that influence health, all of the choices that we either have or don't have by virtue of where we live or what education we have. So being a member of the Board of Trustees feels full circle because education is actually one of the main determinants of individual and community health. And being here at CUNY, serving New Yorkers, which is, you know, a hometown and serves the kinds of students that come from the places that I came from, just feels right.
Thank you for that. And what I love about all your stories is this shared sense of following a passion. So what we really want to get to today is supporting women at every level and learning from each other. And I think that one of the really critical factors in that is having a mentor. I know that one woman, a journalist, you know, kind of changed everything for me years ago. So does anyone want to share a thought about the power of mentors?
I have a mentor who really got me through some very tough times as a young professor in academic medicine. And she said something to this day, when things are tough for me, I remember. She said, one of these days you're going to have a sense of humor about this. And I didn't believe her.
That's excellent advice.
I didn't believe her, but I wanted to believe her. And so when I feel the walls caving in, I remember to like lift myself up and have a sense of humor about whatever's happening.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Right.
I think one of the things we hear a lot from women starting out, though, is I get the value of a mentor. I know that I need one, but how do I find one? Does anyone have a suggestion on that front?
I don't think you find a mentor. I think circumstances happen and you end up encountering someone. I mean, so I don't think you go out and seek a mentor. I mean, I always get the questions, will you mentor me?
Yes.
And it's like, well, what do we have in common? What can I offer you? What are you seeking? So I think that is an important aspect of it. It's like, who do you admire? Who do you like the way they present themselves? What are they doing in whatever field you're interested in, or even in service? That is how you should gravitate towards people, and let them get to know you first before you approach them about being a mentor, because you really want to be able to get something valuable. You want to give something as a mentor, but you also want to get something valuable for someone that you have some synergy with.
Well, that's good advice, really engage. I know that this group cares about supporting minority and women-owned businesses. I would love to hear some advice for entrepreneurs. Sandra, I got to give this one to you.
Well, you have incredible talent here that can offer advice too, but the aspect of women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses is so critical to the economy, the economics, and the families. And really how in New York that got started was that there was very little pathway for that to happen.
Sure, yeah.
Come having the opportunity and the legislation, especially in New York and in other cities and states. But the guidance is in New York that they put together mentor programs at various agencies where women and minority firms starting out, you're just starting out on your business, that they have programs in order to teach, in particular in the building industry, what is essential to know, and especially, and the talent that's out there in New York for young entrepreneurs starting out is tremendous. The question is, and where the goal was, to give these firms and these individuals, businesses, opportunities.
Sure. So I would imagine that the suggestion for people who are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs would be to find those programs, though, to find those mentorship programs.
Just go online and be able to look through New York City small businesses.
Sure.
Look through for New York State, the MWBE program, and the wealth of information is there. And nothing's easy to get started.
Of course.
But they do have the emails and phone numbers that you can call to be able to see what's going on. But in particular, I have to say, being very, very proud of CUNY, where we have a subcommittee specifically on assisting minority and women businesses to do business with CUNY, and it has been going great with that.
One thing that I think women sometimes struggle with in the workplace, many people do, but perhaps women specifically, is the idea of vulnerability. You know, we hear all the time, it's so important to bring your authentic self to the job. It's so important. But I do believe that sometimes that feels risky or it feels high stakes in some moments. So what would your advice be to women on that front? Jill, do you want to jump in there?
Sure. I think it comes like you have to have self-confidence. I think that's the primary thing, because I think you need to bring yourself to the table. You should be able to voice your opinion and not be afraid to voice your opinion. And I also think it's important to raise your hand and volunteer to do more. I think, you know, you come in on a job level, you may be a low level, but you have aspirations to be more than that. But instead of expecting it just to be given to you, raise your hand and offer to do more beyond your scope of your job and prove it by actions that you're capable. And then I think people recognize that and that you'll have more opportunities. At least that's how I've always felt, and I think that's what makes it.
Anyone else have a thought on that topic? Lorraine, I know that's one that's very important to you.
I think we all, and I don't care who you are, all of us have imposters. You know, I don't care how exceptional you are, how talented, how brilliant you are, we all, especially as women, we've been trained that way, we've been bred that way. I'll ask Herminia and Jill at one point, do we have DNA on that? But there is something about that. So you know what? You've got to fake it. You've got to push through that. I love Jill's suggestion of raise your hand, push yourself beyond what you think is possible. And please do not listen to the noise. There's a lot of noise telling you about all the fears out there. You've got your own fears, don't listen to somebody else's, and really push yourself forward.
So switching gears for a moment, obviously all of you are very dedicated to education, being trustees at CUNY, but I'm curious to hear a little bit about why CUNY specifically? What drew you to CUNY specifically? Anyone want to jump in? Herminia, you sort of alluded to this previously.
I did. You know, it is the largest public university, and public means something, right? This is not just a title. This is about a university that understands New Yorkers, that understands New Yorkers who may be first generation, who may be struggling raising their own families, who may not have the opportunities, and who certainly in many instances don't come from extraordinary wealth. And yet, that is the vibrancy of New York, right?
It's what makes us special, right?
It's what makes us special. So the commitment to have public dollars with this kind of mission to support New Yorkers throughout the boroughs and anybody who, you know, else who comes in, that is an incredible privilege. So it's a tremendous honor to be
Yeah.
on the Board of Trustees.
And you
for
both
CUNY.
went to CUNY, I believe,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah,
that right?
Yeah.
Sandra and I went to CUNY.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it changes, literally changes lives, and it changed mine. When I was graduating from high school, my father had passed away, and he was the breadwinner, and so had my mom, which you called stay-at-home mom at the time, never graduated high school, so here she would have to go out and get a job, and I thought I would need to do the same. Right?
Yes.
And my mother said, you must go to college, and knowing moms, you have to listen to
Hooray
your mom.
for moms. Where would we be
Right.
without them, right?
And because of that, and knowing that the ability that it gave me, and directing my life at the time,
Yeah.
and having, as Herminia said, having the opportunity to serve on the board has to be one of the greatest feelings that you can possibly have in terms of what you can offer or see in terms of what goes on at CUNY. It's governance, but it's also the ability of, once again, giving opportunity.
Sure.
And all of us on the board and here just make sure that we keep that in mind when we are seeing the guidelines and the policies that are necessary.
Thank you so much for sharing that and that candid story. Thank you for that. It's really meaningful. I'd like to get to some specific tips and suggestions that might be helpful for young women starting out or women who are transitioning in careers. And so my first question on that front is there a specific habit or principle or something that's part of your must-do daily routine that you feel has been really foundational to your success? Jill, I remember you saying something once before about going to work and emptying the dishwasher.
Well, I think you get a lot done. I think as a working woman, you have the responsibility of your family and running the household. And as much as you have a spouse that's supportive, I still think the burden of that still today falls more on women than it does on men, and at least in most relationships. So I think you learn how to balance things and how to do a lot in a very, they always say busy people get more done.
Yes.
And I think that's true because you don't have time to languish around and not what to do, but you have a schedule, you get it done and make sure. I was always very prepared. I think that was when I was in graduate school for a PhD, a lot of times people came into the lab at 10, 11 o'clock and they start their experiments and then they're there till like 10 and 11 at night. Well, I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, you get in early. I was prepared the day before, knew exactly when I entered that door what was on schedule for that day and get it done efficiently and get out efficiently. And so I think time management is probably a really important thing.
And the dishwasher story I was alluding to is that I remember you saying that your approch at work was that you didn't think that
that's true
things
too.
were not, you didn't consider things above you.
That's
even though
exactly
you were
right. That,
leading the
when
organization.
most of my life was running a nonprofit as the Cancer Research Institute, and I was the first one in the door and usually the last one to leave, but I would come in and unload the dishwasher.
Yes.
And not expect just because I was CEO that's somebody else's job.
Which I think is such an
I
important
think
approach.
you have to lead by example. And I make a big deal about it, but people see that and, they see, I'd start the dishwasher at night. If there were still dishes in the sink, I would be like, come on, guys. Like little things like that. But I think your staff and the people you work with see your work ethic and see that nothing is beneath you. I don't need someone to run and get coffee for me or do copies or Xeroxes. And you do all that yourself. And you show that you can do it as what everybody should be expected to do.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have a must-do sort of part of their routine that you feel has been really helpful to you, that you really abide by?
I want to follow up on what Jill said, which is everyone on your team, whether it's the Xerox person, they don't have Xerox machines anyway, copier person, or at all levels, you need to engage with them and you need to make them feel as if they're part of your team and that they're essential for the organization. There is nothing more important than making everyone in that hierarchy feel as if they are valuable. There is nothing worse that a leader can do is to ignore certain people and act pompous or above anyone. No one learns. You will get minimum from people. If you want to get the best from people, value them. And so every day is a must-do. I go around and I talk to my staff. I mean, the people that I depend on the most are the people at all of the lower levels.
Yes.
Because they really make my life easier. And anyone who makes my life easier is valuable. So just always remember that.
And I think you need to acknowledge people too. I think
Absolutely.
the worst thing I think of a leader and a boss is that takes all the glory.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that they didn't do all the work.
Right.
But maybe
Yes.
they're the public face of the organization, they're out there, but they're relying on all the information and work that the people behind them give. And I think to not steal that thunder, like to acknowledge that this is because of you and you
Right.
did this.
And do that publicly.
That's what I mean, very publicly.
You know, it's like,
yes.
thank you, Sandra. That report was.
Yes.
you know,
Yeah,
what-
no, I agree. And you said something earlier about like your authentic self. I do want to say that authenticity comes in all sorts of flavors, shapes, sizes. There is not one singular model of leadership, right? Authenticity means showing up as who you are, and people will understand if you're being fake or you're being real, right? So
Yeah.
acknowledging people, you have to do that in a way that's
Real.
that's real,
Yes.
right? That's meaningful.
Right.
It's not
Just checking
everything
boxes.
you
Just checking
both said
boxes,
is
yeah.
like absolutely true, but it can't be just a check the box exercise. I think for me, sort of, is if I look back through the retroscope, is showing up without. I was not one of those people because it was speaking about your authentic self. I was not one of those people who had a 5-year plan that works. For some people, that doesn't work for me. So finding sort of what works for you. For me, I always was focused on sort of what's this job at hand. I think one piece of advice I would offer is that you will get knocked down flat on your butt occasionally.
Yes, you will.
And that's part of the journey. It doesn't need to stop you. In fact, it shouldn't stop you. You will learn the most when you're sitting on there on the floor saying, ow, that hurt.
Yeah.
Right? And so the next time you can trip up a different way. My goal is to not try to mess up in the same ways, right? I try to be creative about the way that I mess up.
That's really excellent. Did you want to add something there, Sandra?
Yeah, I just, just what has been said is so critical, especially, for young women in the engineering field, because what happens is they have a meeting on a drawing or a specific critical aspect of a design program. And I noticed that when we get to meetings, it is very difficult for these young engineers to speak up because,
yeah.
one, they don't want to make a mistake. And so there needs to be an understanding that it's okay to say something that just may not be right or may not work. But on the other hand, you also have to make sure that they don't feel that if they do speak up, that there is some support with that.
Yeah, well, mistakes are going to happen. I always think that the recovery matters more most of the time than the mistake itself. I'd love to hear from you what piece of advice, as long as we're talking about advice, what piece of advice you would give your younger selves now looking at your own trajectories. What would you say to that young woman about moving forward?
2 things. I would probably say manage your rage a lot.
Very interesting.
Manage your rage and don't direct it at everyone. All right, so it might be a universal societal rage you have, but everyone is not responsible for it. So manage your rage, but never get rid of your passion or your anger.
Okay.
So you have to do both.
I always keep with me and about Shirley Chisholm,
Yeah.
an alum of CUNY, Brooklyn College, Congresswoman, and ran for president. first woman to run as on the Democratic Party, but to be able to do that when so much the odds were so against her is never forget the quote: if you haven't gotten a seat at the table, bring a folding chair.
Yep.
And just get there and make sure that you are part of the conversation and that your voice counts.
Absolutely.
In that regard.
In that case, don't manage your rage so much.
Okay.
I wanted to sort of,
situations.
follow up on your manage your rage. I think this is something that I learned the hard way. This is one
Right.
of those
We all-
hard
Okay.
lessons learned, is which was me managing expectations, because I figured out that I was unhappiest not when the situation was bad, but when there was a big gap between my expectations and the situation. If I narrowed that gap, regardless of whether it was a great situation or a terrible situation, I could be okay and thrive because my expectations and my reality aligned a little bit closer. And the place where I was most miserable were when expectations and reality were very far apart.
Wow, that is really interesting advice and so self-aware. Is there a don't piece of advice? One thing that I often say to young women is, when asked, is don't start with an apology. Don't start with, I'm sorry to ask, or I'm sorry if this sounds stupid, because I think we shouldn't lead with an apology in most cases, but I hear it too often. Is there a don't piece of advice that any of you have? Something that is a trap that we might fall into?
Don't burn a bridge you've just crossed.
Don't second guess yourself.
Yeah.
That's a good one too. That's a good one too. So I would love.
Don't put another woman down. Like, figure it out.
I really like that. I like it so much. Could you repeat it?
I said, don't put another woman down.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice.
Figure it out.
I'd like to get to one last question with you. I think as all of us go through our lives, we tend to redefine success. Success looks differently at one stage than it did at another stage. What would your advice be to young women about how to think about success? How to think about what success actually means?
Success is determined, I think, by what you feel is important to you. And don't worry about the titles. Titles are not what you should be looking for as much as what you can accomplish with what you're doing.
I guess I feel that success means no matter what your job is, be the very best person you could be in that job. I mean, if you're, if you're sweeping floors, make sure that floor is well swept, and if you're leading an organization, make sure you're proud of that and you can stand up and say, I'm behind this organization and everything I did was for the good of the organization and for the good of the people I work with. So I think, it's that would be.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Herminia, you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's about, do you feel like you're making the best contribution you can under the circumstances and the choices that you have, right? I think it's important to recognize the choices we make are constrained by the choices put before us, so that allowing oneself grace in whatever circumstance one's in to sort of either move to the next level or, as you say, be satisfied with the contribution that you're making in the circumstances that you are.
And Lorraine, the last word on that one?
All right. I believe in this, and I live by this, is leave it better than what you found it, regardless of where it is, what you do, what you're doing. Leave it better than what you found it, and make sure that the people that you're leaving behind are fully intact and ready to go to the next step. That, to me, is real success.
Well, that is a wonderful place to leave this. Thank you so much to all of you for your time and your expertise. We are incredibly grateful.
And thank you for being here.
That wraps up our special presentation. I'm Anne Riddell. For all of us at CUNY TV, thanks so much for being here.